A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Well, on a Wednesday, we like to get an update from Israel and the Middle East, and it's a special treat today. We have Enoch Lavender with us from Olive Tree Ministries. Enoch and his family have just returned from a trip to Israel. Enoch, welcome.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's a privilege to join you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing your stories from Israel, but the breaking news at the moment is that the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has announced that the military wing of Hamas is about to collapse. Tell us what you saw on the ground in Israel when you were there.
So the October 7 terror attacks have changed the mindset of Israelis. They have desired for so long to live in some kind of coexistence with Hamas. They'll stay over there, we'll stay over here. But this terror attack changed their mindset to realize that we can't just get along and sing Kumbaya together. They will continue to attack us, and we need a change on the ground. Whether Israelis are left-wing or right-wing, conservative, whatever values they have, they're all joined together with one mind saying we need to stop Hamas from doing this again. So there is a fundamental change in the mindset of Israelis. Now, there's huge pressure from the international community. Stop. Have a ceasefire. But internally in Israel, there is strong support for what Netanyahu is saying, that we need to and we must seek the elimination of Hamas. But that is where America right now is warning, saying what is going to happen the day after.
Well, yeah, the Biden administration is saying, well, what about the vacuum that's going to be created? But as you said, Israel really doesn't have much choice. They built that wall. I think that wall cost billions of dollars to keep their citizens safe, and the wall failed. The technology failed. Not for the first time in history, a nation state has relied on technology to protect them, and it did fail. But you obviously came across a lot of IDF soldiers when you were there, and I'd really like to hear your perspectives on the war from these IDF soldiers and their families.
So let me touch on two things there. So one is the fence. As you said, the fence it was a super multi-million-dollar project, high-tech. It was supposed to detect anything. And instead, it all failed and they came streaming right through. Now, this very high-tech fence, compared to the barriers around Israeli settlements on the West Bank side, the Israeli settlements are protected by just very flimsy fences and a small checkpoint with maybe one or two soldiers and a gun. And so it's been a real wake-up call to the settlements. There's about 500,000 Jews living in the midst of 2.5 million Arabs, and they feel like they are sitting ducks. So there's been an appeal that's gone out via the Christian community of those who are involved in supporting Jews living in those areas, saying, hey, we need to actually beef up security around these small communities who live in the biblical heartland of Israel. So Shechem, places where Abraham went, where God spoke to him so long ago. So on the ground, it's been a wake-up call for people in that area. On the other hand, as you mentioned, we did get to meet some IDF soldiers. We had a meal with a family of Christians who are serving the Lord, whose children have married local Jewish believers in Jesus. And they told us their stories of what it's like serving in the army in Gaza. And of course, we had lots of questions on that, but they highlighted in particular how everything has to go through a hierarchy. So a decision to bomb a building isn't just taken spur of the moment by some vengeful IDF soldier. Instead, it has to be approved by an echelon of authority who are looking into the details. There has to be warnings sent out. You cannot just go and bomb. Now, normally, the rest of the world wouldn't be warning before they drop a bomb. But here, as they're attacking in Gaza, they do want to save civilian lives. Now, they could have just on the whole war from the air, bombed the whole place to smithereens and not risk any of their soldiers' lives. But a huge value for Israelis and Jewish people is to preserve life. Now, our local news are not telling that story, but they are sending in their soldiers because they want to minimize casualties, because they could just bomb everything to pieces. Like I said, there'll be lots of casualties, but they'll get rid of Hamas. But they don't want to do that. They're willing to risk the lives of the young men and women because they want to get the bad guys while doing their best to keep civilians out of harm's way.
Yeah, and what you just said then is in complete contradiction to the mainstream narrative, which is that Israel has just gone in there recklessly. And, I mean, there's international bodies calling it a war crime. Our own Prime Minister Albanese and his Foreign Minister Penny Wong demanded an inquiry when the Australian aid worker was accidentally killed in an airstrike, which was tragic, and no one was saying it was a good thing. But for our Prime Minister and Penny Wong to even insinuate that Israel are carrying out this war in a reckless, irresponsible manner, I felt that was irresponsible of our national leaders to even say that, because I think 3 British citizens died in the same airstrike. 2 of them were security, and I think 1 was an aid worker. And the British government realised what it was. It was a mistake. Mistakes happen, and they didn't carry on about it as much as we did. So what you're saying there is very much in opposition to what a lot of the mainstream media is saying about Israel and about the IDF.
So if we take on the Christian perspective for a moment, Jesus warned us about the end of days is going to be a time of great deception. And so while it looks like we're getting all these facts from our media and our politicians are just echoing those facts, when you come on the ground in Israel, you see a very different reality. You see about 20% of Israeli citizens are Arabs. You see a coexistence of Jews and Arabs living together, and in fact Arabs serving in the IDF going into Gaza. So you see a very different picture. But Jesus warned us of deception, and what's happening then is that people are jumping on this bandwagon, saying, yes, we need to oppose Israel, and our government, being politically attuned to what's going on, they feel this is a wise decision to jump on the same bandwagon as many countries are. For me personally, I'm praying that we as a church will not be deceived, praying that our nation and our government leaders will understand what is actually really going on, and that we will pray for, yes, the salvation of Jews and of Arabs, because I know God has a heart for both communities and he wants them saved, but also that the truth be told, that truth comes out of what is going on in this conflict.
Yeah, and a simple Google search for our listeners, if you Google the standard of living in Israel compared to the neighbouring nations, there is so much more wealth for the average person in Israel. And as you said, they're not all Jews. 20% of them are Arabs and Christians and Muslims. And there's a reason why they're fighting, that 20% also fight for Israel, because they realised this is the best place in the Middle East to live. It's also democracy. They have the opportunity to vote out their national leaders. Very few Arab nations give you the option of actually voting out a leader. So if you have a corrupt, oppressive leader, there's nothing you can do about it. So Israel in many ways is a light shining in the Middle East, if not the whole world. And it's just amazing to me, Enoch, just standing back watching it, how much the world has turned on Israel.
It is amazing, and in some ways doesn't make sense. Like Israel is the same size as the country of El Salvador. Now, when was the last time you heard about El Salvador on the news? How many know the name of the president of El Salvador, the prime minister of El Salvador? Most of us have got no clue. It's the same size, the same population. I believe that the Bible talks of that God was going to set up Israel as a banner to the nations, a sign to the nations, and a sign that many unfortunately cannot read and do not understand. But for those of us who read our Bibles, I believe it is a sign that God is faithful, that even when the Jewish people did not receive Jesus as the Messiah, yet he remains faithful to his promise. He's brought them back to the land, and I believe one day he'll bring them back to himself. And so, on the one hand, I think this is ultimately a war between the purposes of God and the purposes of the enemy. He wants to kill, steal, and destroy, but God has a purpose for the salvation of Jew and Gentile, for his Son, Jesus, to come back to this earth, to Jerusalem, to rule and reign. And what a day that will be. And we need that hope in the midst of the bad news we're hearing, in the midst of the bad things, that he is one day coming back to his city, to the place he has chosen.
Yeah, amen. And you mentioned that, many of the IDF, well, not many, but some of the IDF soldiers are actually of Arab descent and sometimes even Christians. And I think there was a fairly high-profile funeral in Israel recently for a German Christian who died fighting in the IDF.
Yeah, so his family were from Germany. They decided to move to Israel because of what happened during the Holocaust. They are Christians who really wanted to make amends. You know, it's one thing to say, I'm sorry. It's another thing to actually take the step to say, I want to pay you back any way I can. And so they as a family have lived there, raised their children there, and now their 18 or 19-year-old son, his name was Uriah, enlisted in the army. And he got accolades for serving really well, being on the front lines, being a very respected soldier. And then he ultimately was killed in Gaza. And the news went out in Israel about this Christian German serving in the army. He didn't have to be there. He could be home in comfortable Germany. But he, as a Christian, knew from his own perspective what was happening on the ground. He had decided to stand with the Jewish people to the point of being willing to lay down his life. And that is what he did. And so at the funeral, about 3,000 Jews came to hear the story of this family, of this Christian standing with them in this hard time. And really, in the Jewish world right now, they feel so isolated. And so for someone, a Christian, to stand with them in this way really spoke volumes. And they want to hear, well, why are you standing with us? Why are you coming in this time? Why did you lay down your life for us? And may they, through that, hear our message and our hope we have found in Jesus.
Yeah, that's a powerful story, isn't it? So powerful, and that 3,000 Jewish people went to the funeral to learn more about this young man's story. We did interview a Christian pastor just after October 7th, actually, and he said about 25, I think it was, or 27 of his church members were also serving on the front lines, including his worship pastor. And I thought, gee, I'd like to see some Australian worship pastors serving on the front lines, because some of them would be flat out get their skinny jeans off. And but, you know, just again, these are Christian people fighting in the IDF because they love Israel, they live in Israel, and they believe in that Western democracy, and not to mention the spiritual dimension of Israel. But overall, Enoch, what was your sense about the people of Israel? How's the mood of the nation right now?
So the nation of Israel were very much in shock over what happened. It took them off guard, and they have put so much trust in the IDF. So living so close to Gaza, they're setting their lives on the line, believing that the IDF would always come and rescue them. And the IDF did not come. And so it's really shaken them to their core. And then, of course, the wave of anti-Israel protests around the world that have intensified so much has really shaken the Jewish community around the world, including in Australia, where they feel very, very isolated. And so for me and my family, we went there in November, barely a month after the war broke out, with our 3 little kids. Now, we didn't plan to go there in the midst of a war. It was a pre-planned trip. But when we went there as a family at that time, it spoke volumes to a people who are going through such hardship, to see Christians come and stand with them and pray for them in a difficult time. And so one Reverend Mark Leach, who you may have heard of, he said, if you have any Jewish friends around you, he said, hug a Jew today. What he meant is extend your arms of love to them in such a difficult time. They need to hear and know your love and your prayers at this time.
Incredible. Well done for going there, and I'm sure many were touched by the love of your family and the fact that you guys were there on the ground showing your solidarity with them. But this is Enoch Lavender. He's from Olive Tree Ministries, and if someone wants to connect to Olive Tree Ministries, Enoch, it's just a case of Googling Olive Tree Ministries and you'll pop up there?
Yeah, Olive Tree Ministries, Enoch Lavender, or olivetreeministries.tv.
Well, Enoch, I want to thank you so much for joining us on 2020 Today.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.